enjoyed our conversation just yesterday, and of course, I'm real interested in general to try to get the FDA to maintain all of its integrity and standards, but pick up the pace a bit. Co-founded the ALS caucus here in the Senate. Know that we've recently got a Alzheimer's drug out there approved. I still sense extreme frustration among the individuals out there struggling with these diseases that have got clinical trials, got stuff in motion, they see good results, and especially willing to take the risk that with an ALS patient, 3 to 4 years from day of diagnosis to when your life ends. And if you're in one of those trials and it at least seems to be working, how do we get more agility, maybe entrepreneurialism? Look what we did recently with the vaccine without sacrificing the process and the safety features. Generally in life, you can't take forever to get things done and avoid all risk. Things pass you by in the interim. So love to hear your thoughts on that.
Well, I think there are some misperceptions about where the barriers are and the blockages, right? FDA does review drugs very rapidly due to the user fee programs. We're probably the fastest agency in the world in a developed country to get things reviewed and, if approvable, on the market, right? But for the neurodegenerative diseases, of which Alzheimer's and ALS are a part of, the science has been slow to develop. While we had a war on cancer, remember, it started in the 70s. Now, in the last 10 years, we're seeing the fruits of that. We're seeing new cancer drugs that are unprecedented, that really make a difference and are not so toxic, that aren't just, and the reason is that we understand cancer. We understand the molecular changes that lead to somebody getting a cancer. And what's happening is we're getting drugs that target the specific mutations that are driving that cancer and can block it, or that stimulate the immune system. In neurodegeneration, we're still at a more primitive area of science. We don't really understand why these things are happening to people, for example, with ALS. And so then it's very hard. So the problem is more in the developmental area. We're still in what we call empirical development to some extent, which means just try it and see if it works, rather than we are trying to interrupt a very specific pathway and we understand its role in bringing on the disease. So I believe FDA has worked very closely. I personally have corresponded recently with many individuals and families of people with ALS. I totally understand the devastating tragedies that are occurring every day to families and to people because of this illness. And we will do everything we can to move these therapies along and be very flexible. However, we need good science because we need treatments that are going to work to advance the treatment of this disease.
So I think then it begs the question of the main stakeholder in all of this, to me, is the patient. And to me, it looks like the patient oftentimes is not the driver behind what might be out there to help them. So is the patient driving the process, at least in terms of that trade-off between the risk of having something that's not ready, but the willingness to take it on? So comment a little bit about, to me, it shouldn't be the agency, it shouldn't be the drug company. Maybe it ought to be the patient that has a little bit more say-so in the speed at which that only remedy that may be out there is going to be available to them.
Well, we have something called patient-focused drug development we've been doing for some time, and we do really hear the voice of the patient. We feel the voice of the patient should be central. A long time ago, we heard the same reasoning from people with HIV. when AIDS was common and people were dying. And they said, we try anything, we don't care, just get it to us. As soon as we got semi-effective drugs, people wanted then drugs that were more effective. Let us live longer, let us do better, right? And we want the best drug for me, okay, that'll keep me, have fewer side effects and keep me going. Of course, now, because of that flexibility and the effort we put in, living with HIV is a chronic disease. And that's where we'd like to, as step one, to get some of these neurodegenerative diseases. So we do listen to the patients. However, getting a lot of ineffective remedies out there would not be in conformance with the law, really, and it wouldn't help the patients. Because if we have all these people advocating for ineffective therapies, we don't know if any of them work, we don't advance science, that's not how medical science really gets to a point that really helps people. Like we have with HIV, like we're getting there with cancer, we're improving survival rates in cancer. So we have to keep a balance between, I understand, and we have, Congress passed, for example, right to try, so people can access investigational therapies if companies are willing, right? And we have expanded access programs, so if this compounds are being studied, then people can get them for treatment if they are not going to be able to get into the studies. So we have those mechanisms because we understand we have a problem right now, people are dying, but we have another problem. We need to build the medical science so we can treat this disease and turn it into a chronic disease people can live with.
Thank you.
Senator Hyde-Smith.